Commander Rhys Thorne never expected to die among the stars. As his fighter spiraled through the atmosphere of an unknown planet, warnings blared through the cockpit. The experimental stealth drive had failed catastrophically during a routine reconnaissance mission, leaving him plummeting through space in a craft that was quickly becoming his coffin. The planet's surface rushed up to meet him, a blur of purple forests and crystalline mountains. His last thought before impact was of the irony: humanity's most advanced stealth technology had turned him into the most visible object in the alien sky. When consciousness returned, it came with the sharp smell of antiseptic and the soft hum of unknown machinery. Rhys's eyes flickered open to find himself in what appeared to be a medical facility, though unlike any he had ever seen. The walls seemed to pulse with an inner light, and delicate instruments floated in mid-air, suspended by invisible forces. Your survival was improbable. The voice was melodic but cold, speaking perfect English with an otherworldly accent. Rhys turned his head to find its source, and froze. She stood at least 7 feet tall, her skin a deep violet that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. Silver markings traced patterns across her face and bare arms, and her eyes were entirely black except for points of light that seemed to mirror the stars themselves. She wore what appeared to be a medical uniform, though it moved like liquid metal across her form. "Dr. Nyara Vess," she said, checking readings on a holographic display that hovered near his bed. "And you are an impossibility that I now must deal with." Rhys tried to sit up, only to find his body wouldn't respond. Paralyzed, he managed to ask through dry lips. "Temporarily. A necessary precaution." She moved closer, her movements precise and elegant. "Your kind are not welcome here on Lysaria. By law, I should have left you to die in that wreckage, or called the authorities immediately. But you didn't," Rhys observed, studying her face for any hint of emotion. "A weakness of mine," she replied. "I took an oath to preserve life. All life." Her star-filled eyes narrowed. "Even human life." The way she said "human" carried weight, history, prejudice, pain. Rhys had been briefed about this sector of space, about the worlds that had declared themselves off-limits to humanity after the resource wars. Lysaria had been mentioned specifically, though the details were classified. "Thank you," he said simply. "For choosing your oath over your laws." Something flickered across her alien features, surprise, perhaps? "Don't thank me yet, Commander Thorne. Saving your life may have been the easy part. Keeping you alive." She turned away, adjusting something on one of the floating instruments. "That will be considerably more difficult." As feeling began to return to his limbs, Rhys took stock of his situation. His flight suit had been removed, replaced with what felt like silk but looked like woven starlight. His injuries, which should have been fatal, felt like nothing more than the aftermath of a strenuous workout. "Your medical technology is remarkable," he said, flexing his fingers experimentally. "Your primitive understanding of medicine is remarkable," she countered, but there was less edge to her tone now. "Your species still cuts open bodies to heal them. Like mechanics working on obsolete machinery. Yet here I am, alive thanks to your advanced methods." Rhys managed to prop himself up on his elbows. "Seems like there's something to learn from each other." Nyara turned back to him sharply. "Is that why you were in our restricted space, Commander? To learn?" The question carried dangerous implications. Rhys chose his next words carefully. "I can't discuss my mission. But I can tell you it wasn't hostile in nature. Humans always say that, at first." She moved to a console on the wall, her back to him. "They come seeking knowledge, trade, cultural exchange. And then they find something they want. Something they think they deserve." Her fingers paused over the controls. "And then the warships arrive." Rhys felt the weight of history in her words. "Whatever happened between our people in the past, I'm not part of it. I'm just a pilot who crashed on your world. A pilot with experimental stealth technology, she observed. Flying through restricted space. And now completely at your mercy, he pointed out. You could turn me in at any moment. Yet here we are, having this conversation. Nyara was silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter. The authorities will be scanning for crashed debris soon. They will find your ship, and they will look for survivors. We have perhaps 2 planetary rotations before they expand their search to this region. Then I need to leave before that happens. Impossible. Your injuries, while stabilized, require at least 4 rotations to heal properly. And even then. She gestured to a window, through which he could see the purple forests stretching to the horizon. Where would you go? Reese studied her carefully. You have a suggestion? I have a proposal, she corrected, turning to face him fully. One that serves both our interests. You will remain here, hidden, while I continue your treatment. In exchange, you will help me understand the technology that brought you to my world. The stealth drive? It's classified technology. It's also destroyed, she pointed out. I'm not asking for military secrets, Commander. I'm asking for engineering principles. Knowledge freely given in exchange for your life. Reese considered her offer. There was more here than she was saying. Her interest in human technology seemed personal rather than professional. But he was in no position to refuse. Deal, he said. Though I have one condition. Her star-filled eyes narrowed. You are hardly in a position to make demands. Call me Reese, he said with a slight smile. If we're going to be working together, we might as well be on a first-name basis. For the first time, he saw what might have been amusement cross her alien features. Very well. Reese. Rest now. You'll need your strength for what's to come. As she turned to leave, Reese called after her. Dr. Vess? Why did you really save me? She paused at the doorway, her form silhouetted against the soft light. Perhaps I too am tired of letting history dictate our choices. Then she was gone, leaving Reese alone with his thoughts and the steady hum of alien machinery keeping him alive. The next few days passed in a blur of recovery and revelation. Nyara's medical facility, Reese learned, was actually her private research station, hidden away in the remote forests of Lysaria. The isolation that had once protected her work now served a new purpose, keeping him concealed from the authorities who would gladly execute them both. Your cellular regeneration is remarkable, Nyara observed one morning, studying readings from a bioscanner that hovered over Reese's chest. Far faster than my models predicted. Reese watched her work, fascinated by the way her silver markings seemed to shift and flow with her movements. Maybe humans aren't as primitive as you thought. Your biology isn't primitive, she corrected, not looking up. Your technology, your methods of warfare. She let the sentence hang. You keep bringing that up, Reese noted. The war. But our historical records don't mention any major conflict with Lysaria. Nyara's hands stilled. The points of light in her dark eyes seemed to pulse. Because your people didn't consider it major. To you, it was just another resource acquisition. To us. She turned away, but not before Reese caught a glimpse of raw pain in her expression. Tell me, he said softly. Help me understand. For a long moment, he thought she would refuse. Then she pressed a sequence into the wall console, and the room dimmed. A holographic display sprang to life, showing a younger Lysaria. The purple forests were more extensive, and crystalline cities rose like dreams among them. 30 years ago, your corporations discovered that our world's crystal formations could enhance quantum computing, she began, her voice distant. They offered trade at first. When we refused to mine our sacred sites, they returned with warships. The hologram shifted, showing scenes of devastation. Human vessels in the sky, crystal towers falling, forests burning. Reese felt sick watching it. I was a child when they came, Nyara continued. My parents were researchers, like me. They believed they could negotiate peace through shared scientific advancement. They were wrong. The hologram flickered to an image of a destroyed laboratory. The humans wanted weapons, not knowledge. When my parents refused to help. I'm sorry, Reese whispered, understanding now the depth of her initial hatred. Nyara shut off the hologram, the room brightening again. Your apology changes nothing. No, he agreed. But understanding might change everything. He carefully sat up, still mindful of his healing injuries. What your people suffered was wrong. But isolation isn't the answer. Look at us, what we've accomplished together in just a few days. You mean your continued survival? Her tone was sharp, but he caught the faintest curl at the corner of her mouth. I mean the way you've completely revolutionized my understanding of medical science. And don't pretend you haven't been fascinated by my explanations of our stealth technology. Your primitive cloaking attempts are hardly revolutionary. Yet you've taken 6 pages of notes. Their eyes met, and for a moment the tension between them shifted into something else entirely. Nyara broke the contact first, turning back to her instruments. Your recovery is proceeding well, she said briskly. Soon you'll be strong enough to help me salvage what we can from your ship's wreckage. The authorities will be watching that area. I have ways of avoiding detection. She gave him a significant look. I've had years to perfect my own stealth technology. Reese raised an eyebrow. Now who's sharing military secrets? Personal research, she corrected. For personal reasons. Like harboring fugitive humans? Like surviving in a world that doesn't always align with one's principles. She moved closer, her height forcing him to look up to meet her gaze. Not everyone on Lasseria shares the government's isolationist views. Some of us remember what we lost when we closed ourselves off from the galaxy. Knowledge, Reese said. Progress. Hope, Nyara countered. The hope that different species could learn from each other. Could grow beyond their past mistakes. She studied him intently. Perhaps that hope wasn't entirely misplaced. Before Reese could respond, an alarm blared through the facility. Nyara rushed to the console, her movements suddenly urgent. Security breach, she announced. Something triggered the outer sensors. Authorities? No. Different energy signature. Her fingers flew over the controls. Unknown technology. It's... Her eyes widened. It's human. Reese stood, ignoring the protest from his healing body. A rescue team? Or reinforcements, Nyara said darkly. Coming to claim what they think is theirs. Their eyes met again, the fragile trust between them suddenly strained by the weight of history and suspicion. In that moment, Reese knew they stood on a knife's edge. Everything they'd built over the past few days could shatter with a single wrong choice. Let me talk to them, he said. Whatever they're here for, I can convince them to leave. And if they refuse? Nyara's voice was tight. If they discover what I am, what I know. Reese moved closer, slowly reaching out to touch her arm. Her skin was cool beneath his fingers, the silver markings tingling against his palm. Then we'll face it together. You trusted me with your life when you saved mine. Now I'm asking you to trust me again. For a long moment, Nyara stood frozen, her alien eyes unreadable. Then, slowly, she covered his hand with her own. Together, she agreed. But Reese? Her grip tightened. If you betray that trust, no force in this galaxy will protect you from me. He smiled, despite the very real threat in her words. I wouldn't have it any other way. The scene depicts a futuristic medical environment. Characters, a blue-skinned figure, likely an alien or android, is tending to a male human character who appears unconscious on an examination table. The human has visible injuries, including bruises and torn clothing. Setting: the background features advanced medical equipment, with screens displaying various data and images, suggesting a high-tech laboratory or operating room. Mood: the interaction between the characters seems urgent, the caregiver is focused on providing assistance. The lighting is atmospheric, perhaps hinting at a sci-fi theme. Overall, the imagery conveys a blend of tension and intrigue in a sci-fi context. Time seemed to blur as Reese and Nyara worked frantically to prepare for their escape. The transport ship was sleek and alien, but its basic systems weren't that different from what he was used to. As he integrated his knowledge of human stealth technology with Nyara's theoretical innovations, he couldn't help but marvel at how naturally they worked together. "Power coupling secured," he called out, sliding from beneath the control panel. "How's the cloaking matrix?" "Integrated, but unstable," Nyara replied, her tall form bent over a complex array of crystals. "The merge between our technologies is unprecedented. It could work perfectly, or scatter us across half the sector." Reese wiped sweat from his brow. "Wouldn't be the worst way to go." Nyara shot him a look that somehow conveyed both irritation and amusement. "Your species' capacity for gallows humor is remarkable. One of our better qualities," he grinned, then sobered as another alarm blared through the facility. "Status? Mercenaries have breached the outer perimeter." Her fingers flew over the controls. 20 minutes until they reached the main complex. And she hesitated. "What?" "Lysarian security forces are converging from the north. They must have detected the mercenaries' presence." Reese swore softly. "How long until they get here?" 25 minutes. "We'll be caught between them. Unless we finish these modifications in 15. He moved to her side, studying the crystal array. "Talk me through what you need." For a moment, Nyara seemed to hesitate, her alien eyes searching his face. Then she began explaining, her words precise and quick. Reese followed her instructions, their hands moving in concert as they wove together two vastly different technologies into something entirely new. They were so focused on their work that they almost missed the first explosion. The facility shook, instruments rattling on their mountings. Nyara steadied herself against the ship's hull, her markings pulsing with alarm. "They're using plasma charges to breach the defensive barriers," she said, checking a nearby display. 10 minutes, not 15. Reese made a quick decision. "Get in. Start the launch sequence. I'll finish the final connections. If the alignment isn't perfect then I guess you'll have to find another human to experiment on." He met her gaze. "Trust goes both ways, remember?" Another explosion rocked the facility, closer this time. Through the hangar doors, they could hear weapons fire. The mercenaries had encountered the facility's automated defenses. Nyara touched his shoulder briefly, her cool fingers lingering for just a moment, then climbed into the transport's cockpit. The ship hummed to life around them as Reese worked furiously to complete the integration. "Security forces are deploying shock troops," Nyara reported from above. "They'll breach the northern perimeter in 7 minutes. "Almost there," Reese muttered, making the final adjustments to the crystal matrix. The technology was beautiful, really, Lysarian precision combined with human innovation. If it worked, it would do more than just hide them. It would prove what their peoples could achieve together. If it worked. A blast door at the far end of the hangar began to glow red. The mercenaries were burning through. "Reese." Nyara's voice held an edge he hadn't heard before. Was it concern? Fear? Something else entirely? "Done." He slammed the access panel shut and vaulted into the cockpit. Nyara's hands were flying over the controls, the ship's engines building to a high-pitched whine. The blast door exploded inward. Through the smoke, Reese caught glimpses of armed figures moving forward, weapons raised. At the same time, alarms indicated Lasarian forces breaching the northern entrance. "Hold on," Nyara said, and slammed the activation sequence. For one terrible moment, nothing happened. The crystal array hummed, power building, as weapons fire began to pepper the ship's hull. Reese reached for the defensive controls, but Nyara caught his wrist. "Wait," she said softly. The humming reached a crescendo. In the hangar, both human mercenaries and Lasarian security forces were converging on their position. Reese saw weapons being aimed, orders being shouted in multiple languages. Then the world shifted. It was like looking through a prism made of starlight. The ship seemed to bend reality around itself, light and energy flowing in ways that defied physics. Through the distortion, Reese could see their attackers stumbling back, shielding their eyes. By the void, Nyara breathed. It actually worked. The ship rose smoothly, the hangar doors parting automatically. Below them, the facility was a battleground, but none of the combatants seemed able to track their position. The new stealth system didn't just hide them, it made them practically non-existent. As they accelerated upward, Reese saw Nyara initiate one final command sequence. Behind them, her facility began to power down, decades of research being systematically erased. "Your life's work," he said quietly. "No," she replied, her star-filled eyes fixed on the sky above. "My life's work is just beginning." They broke atmosphere moments later, the ship's engines barely straining as they climbed toward the stars. Long-range sensors showed pursuit craft launching, but none could lock onto their position. The combined stealth technology was performing better than either of them had dared hope. "We did it," Reese said, finally allowing himself to relax slightly. "Where to now?" Nyara was quiet for a moment, her alien features thoughtful. "There are others," she said finally. "Both human and Lasarian, who believe as we do. That isolation and fear only breed more conflict." She turned to him. "Help me find them?" Reese looked at her, this brilliant, complex being who had saved his life and then chosen to risk everything on a chance at something better. In her star-filled eyes, he saw not just intelligence and determination, but hope. Hope for a future where their peoples could move past old hatreds and achieve amazing things together. He reached over and took her hand, marveling at how right it felt despite their differences. "Together," he promised. The ship streaked through space, carrying them toward an uncertain future. Behind them, they left a world of secrets and suspicion. Ahead lay countless challenges, dangers, and possibilities. But they would face them together, proof that sometimes the greatest discoveries come not from technology or science, but from learning to trust across the boundaries that divide us. 3 months after their escape from Lasaria, Reese stood at the viewport of their modified transport ship, watching distant stars drift by. They'd been busy in that time, making contact with underground networks of both humans and Lysarians who dreamed of rebuilding bridges between their peoples. But more than that, they'd been learning about each other. The latest transmission from Dr. Vrel's group, Nyara announced, entering the bridge with her characteristic fluid grace. "They're ready to present our findings to the Lasarian Science Council." Reese turned from the viewport, still struck by how his perception of her had changed. What had once seemed alien and intimidating now felt familiar, even beautiful. Her violet skin shimmed with its own inner light, and her silver markings pulsed gently in what he now recognized as contentment. "They're taking a huge risk," he said. "The Council hasn't been kind to advocates of human cooperation in the past. The evidence is too compelling to ignore this time." Nyara moved to the ship's main console, calling up displays of their work. "Our merged stealth technology was just the beginning. The medical applications alone." She trailed off as Reese came to stand beside her, their shoulders almost touching. The displays showed the fruits of their collaboration, healing techniques that combined Lasarian biocrystal technology with human cellular regeneration theory, defensive systems that could protect both species' worlds from cosmic threats, and most importantly, proof that they were stronger together than apart. "We've done good work," Reese said softly. "We've done impossible work," Nyara corrected, turning to face him. Even after all this time, he had to look up to meet her star-filled eyes. "When I saved you that day, I never imagined that you'd end up a fugitive scientist revolutionizing two civilizations." He smiled. "No regrets?" Her markings pulsed with what might have been amusement. "Many. But none about saving you." The ship's AI chimed softly, announcing their approach to the coordinates where they would meet Dr. Vrel's team. Soon, their research would be presented to the Council, forcing both societies to confront the possibility of reconciliation. It was a dangerous moment. Everything they'd worked for could either bloom into something remarkable or collapse into renewed conflict. "There's something we need to discuss," Nyara said suddenly, her tone serious. "About what happens after." Reese felt his pulse quicken. They'd been dancing around this conversation for weeks. "I'm listening. Assuming we succeed, assuming both sides agree to open diplomatic channels, we'll need people who understand both cultures. Who can bridge the gap?" She hesitated, then continued. "The Council will need proof that genuine cooperation is possible. That our peoples can truly connect." "Are you proposing what I think you're proposing?" Reese asked carefully. Nyara's markings pulsed rapidly, betraying her nervousness despite her controlled expression. "Among my people, there is an ancient tradition. When two beings save each other's lives, not just physically, but in ways that transform them, they can claim a bond. A formal recognition of their connection. Like marriage?" Reese suggested. "Deeper. It's a declaration that two souls have become essentially one, regardless of their origins." She met his gaze directly. "It hasn't been done between our species before. Many will oppose it. But it would be impossible to ignore," Reese finished. "Proof that humans and Lysarians can not only work together but love," Nyara said simply. The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Love, not just between individuals, but as a bridge between worlds. As a force for healing old wounds and building new futures. Reese reached up, gently tracing one of her silver markings with his finger. Her skin was cool beneath his touch, but he felt the energy that pulsed through her responding to his presence. "When you saved my life," he said quietly, "you said it was just duty. Following your oath." "I lied," she admitted. "Even then, there was something. A recognition, perhaps. As if some part of me knew where this path would lead. To us becoming fugitives?" Her lips curved in that subtle way he'd grown to cherish. "To us becoming proof that the universe is larger than our fears." The ship's AI announced final approach. Soon they would need to focus on the task ahead, presenting their work, arguing for change, facing the resistance that would inevitably come. But for now, in this moment, there was only this. "Yes," Reese said. Nyara's markings pulsed with surprise. "Yes? To your tradition. To the bond. To whatever comes next." He smiled. "You saved my life that day, but you've saved me in 1,000 ways since then. Everything I am now, everything I hope we can accomplish together, it all started with you choosing hope over fear." Nyara's hand found his, their fingers intertwining despite their differences. "Then let us give both our people something new to hope for." As their ship approached the rendezvous point, they stood together at the viewport, watching the stars. Soon they would face the challenges of changing two societies set in their ways, of proving that love could bridge the gap between worlds. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever was. But they had each other. They had their work. And most importantly, they had proof that when two hearts choose to trust despite every reason not to, miraculous things become possible. The future stretched before them, as vast and full of possibilities as the galaxy itself. And they would face it as they had faced everything since that first fateful day, together, proving that sometimes the greatest discoveries aren't made in laboratories or workshops, but in the space between two souls brave enough to reach across the stars and say, I choose you, I trust you, I love you. Not just as individuals, but as a symbol of what their peoples could become.